let me finish up with what you would go through for reinstallation of the rest of the parts, and then we'll give you a couple other points. So the next step, after you got the ball joints and the knuckle on, we go back to putting the axle back in. Okay, again, wipe out the tube, put the axle back in. If the U-joint's bad, now's a good time to change it. The hub goes on next. It's a good idea to take that hub to a wire wheel and clean the outside rust off of it. You could put a little bit of lubricant around the outside like anti-seize where it contacts the hub, the knuckle. And then you start the 4 bolts, okay? And the bolts then get a torque. It is 149 foot-pounds on those bolts on the back side of the hub. Make sure you do them alternately in a star pattern so it pulls that hub up uniformly, okay? And then you can put your rotor back on, put your axle nut back on, and start it. And then you can put your caliper on, the caliper bolts. The big ones should probably get some blue Loctite attached to them, and they get 134 foot-pounds. And then the small ones that hold the caliper to the bracket get 24 foot-pounds, okay? The axle nut torque is a little bit peculiar. The first thing they have you do is install the washer and nut, tighten it to 132 foot-pounds. Then they tell you to turn the rotor 5 to 10 times to seat the bearing, and then come back with 263 foot-pounds, okay? Then you put your cotter key through. Now, in all cases, if the cotter key doesn't line up after you make your installation, you always tighten it more, okay? Sometimes it'll have a self-locking nut, like on the offset design, and sometimes it will have a castellated nut with a hole through the stud on our straight design. That way you can use a cotter key. But you've got to make sure that you torque it to specs and then go more if the cotter key doesn't line up. And then the last thing would be reinstall the tie rod in, and that nut gets 55 foot-pounds. I also wanted to point out something else. The factory provides a cam at the front of the lower control arm on the straight axle design here on these Dodge straight axle trucks. And this is found on most of the four-wheel drive late model Dodge and Jeep applications. There's one on each side of the truck, but since it's a straight axle, you cannot have different caster from side to side. In other words, if you make an adjustment over here, you're turning the entire axle, and you're going to have a similar change on the other side. So you have to keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that when you make that adjustment, it's slightly changing pinion angle as well.